So, good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our September FCI forum, which we are calling Faith Consistent Investing and the Journey to Impact. I'm Dave Zellner. I'm the executive chair of FaithInvest, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. Now, before we jump in, my colleague Pippa is posting the netiquette rules in the chat, as well as our FaithInvest disclaimer. And just to let you know, we'll be recording the session. And so before I welcome our three panelists today, I briefly wanted to introduce you to FaithInvest for those of you that are with us for the first time. We're an international not-for-profit organization. We were founded in 2019, and our purpose is to support faith organizations that seek to invest in line with their values to help achieve environmental social impact. And although we have invest in our name, we don't advise faiths on investments or help them make investment decisions. We are primarily philanthropically funded. We help faiths implement values-driven, faith-consistent investing by providing free resources and guides, including free confidential assessments of their investment policy and guidelines, and then convening gatherings similar to this one. We also provide some fee-based services such as training and one-on-one support for faith groups. As the chair of FaithInvest since its founding in 2019, I've had the privilege of witnessing the growing movement of faith-based organizations seeking to align their investment practices with their core values. And today's discussion addresses one of the most persistent challenges in our field, which is the perceived tension between doing well financially and doing good through our investments. Many faith-based institutional investors operate under a prudent fiduciary mandate that requires them to focus on earning market rates of return. But simultaneously, the staff and the trustees of these organizations, they universally aspire to align their investments with their faith beliefs. However, a common misperception continues to persist among trustees and staff that are subject to these fiduciary mandates, which is that faith consistent investing, or FCI, somehow conflicts with their fiduciary responsibility. So the subjective belief that one cannot do well while doing good continues to create barriers to broader adoption of impact investment strategies. So today we have the privilege of hearing from three distinguished panelists who represent a diversity of faith-based institutions at different stages of their journey towards investing for impact. Their experiences span over 3 decades and demonstrate that it is indeed possible to honor both fiduciary duty and one's faith values. So I'll now introduce the panelists to you. The first is Sylvia Poniecki. She's the Director of Impact Investments at Wespath Benefits and Investments, representing the United Methodist faith tradition. Wespath began its pioneering journey in impact investing over 35 years ago, making them true trailblazers in putting FCI to practice. Christopher Rowe serves as Managing Director of Investments at the Church Pension Group, representing the Episcopal faith tradition. The Church Pension Group embarked on their impact investing journey approximately 25 years ago, offering valuable insights into the evolution of this field. And finally, Teresa Robinson is the Executive Director of the Raskub Foundation for Catholic Activities, representing the Roman Catholic faith tradition. The Raskub Foundation has just recently begun their journey in impact investing, and she'll provide a contemporary perspective on starting this process today. So let's get started. Sylvia, I'd like to begin with you. Could you briefly tell our audience about Wespath and what served as the catalyst behind the origin of your organization's journey to impact investing 35 years ago? Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I should mention that I retired as the chief investment officer from Wespath a year ago, and Sylvia and I have worked together for over about 12 years. So, Sylvia, take it away.
It's been a good 12 years, so thank you, Dave. So for those not familiar with Wespath, we are a general agency of the United Methodist Church, currently managing about 27 billion in assets, and a portion of the investments fall under Wespath's Positive Social Purpose Lending Program. The program focuses primarily on investments supporting affordable housing and community development in the U.S. The program started in 1990, so like Dave said, 35 years, and they've been a great 35 years. There's been some challenges, but definitely a program we are very proud of. And the genesis of it really stems from members of our board back in 1990 visiting blighted neighborhoods in New York. They saw the deplorable conditions that people were living in, and they sought to create a program that would address the needs of populations in need, while still upholding their fiduciary obligation to their investors. So when the program started, we started with a $25 million infusion into the program. And we've since invested over 2.1 billion cumulatively, primarily supporting the creation and preservation of nearly 54,000 units of affordable housing across the country. And all of these investments that we're making through the program are market rate investments commensurate with risk.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, Christopher, I'd like to turn to you now. Please tell us about the Church Pension Group and what was the catalyst that drove your organization to begin its impact journey.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with you and everyone today. As mentioned, the Church Pension Fund, it supports the clergy and lay employees of the Episcopal Church. We're an $18 billion defined benefit plan. And actually, it's interesting, similar to Wespath's journey, that where there were observations around blighted communities back in 2000. Our church leadership was observing similar trends and encouraged us to try to make investments in community investments that would support those blighted communities. That was about 25 years ago. And at the same time, of course, we were very focused on, while we are a faith-based investor and a pension plan that is market oriented, we're always looking to support the values of the church. So at the time, back in 2000, Alan Snoddy, who was our head of real estate at the time, made our first impact investment with Canyon Johnson, which is a joint venture with Canyon Capital and Johnson Development. Johnson, of course, as many of you may know, is Magic Johnson, the basketball player. And the goal of that particular investment was to invest in underserved urban areas, similar to what Sylvia and Wespath were doing already. And then fast forward about 10, 15 years later, and there was a collective societal call to divest from fossil fuel companies. But again, as a pension plan and a fiduciary, our preference, our focus was really more so not on divestment, but proactive positive impact investments. And so rather than divesting at the time in the early 2010s, we started making investments in climate solutions and positive impact investments around climate. And then over the years since then, we've made a number of different impact investments in a range of strategies, from microfinance, climate, sustainable agriculture, affordable housing, and in many ways working with collaboratively with other investments like Wespath. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thanks so much, Christopher. And Teresa, could you please share with our audience about the Raskub Foundation and then what what motivated you all? What was the catalyst for you all entering into impact investing?
Oh, thank you, Dave. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel with Sylvia and Christopher. I intend to learn a lot today. For those of you who don't know, the Raskop Foundation for Catholic Activities was established in 1945 by John and Helena Raskob. John was a titan of industry, instrumental in the creation of DuPont, GM, GMAC, and he conceived of and helped finance the Empire State Building. Yet it was not their financial success, but their deep faith that John and Helena chose as their lasting legacy. John and Helena were people of great faith who believed their wealth and abundance were gifts from God and to be used as instruments of his will. In creating the foundation, they wanted their family to witness the goodness in the world and the church and to experience the joy of a life of service. Their ultimate goal was that this shared work and the commitment to the church would bind their family together for generations. 5 generations later, I think that vision is coming to fruition for them. Our Raskop family members serve on our board of trustees, our standing and ad hoc committees, including our finance committee, and they review and recommend all of our funding requests. They are deeply engaged in all aspects of our mission and our operations. And our journey into impact investing began as all of our initiatives do, and that is with the passion and curiosity of our family members. In this case, several family members and staff engaged with learning communities like FaithInvest, the Francesco Collaborative, Seek, and the GIN to understand the landscape of impact investing and to learn how other organizations were leveraging their investments to advance their mission. Negative screening aligned with USCCB guidelines has always been a standard in our investment policy statement. But impact investing has brought a new level of intention and integration into our discussions. It has allowed us to combine financial discipline with faith-based values that enhance our market returns with deeper purpose. The process so far has been very fruitful, and it has given us the opportunity to understand our values at a deeper level and to explore how we put those values into action within our portfolio processes.
Very good, thank you. So, Christopher, I want to come back to you. When you all started, you talked about Alan Snoddy's first efforts with Kenyon Johnson 25 years ago. So, what were the main hurdles that you all had to overcome in beginning your impact journey?
Well, some early days, I mean, I can't speak for Alan in his sort of day-to-day experience. I mean, he was asked to make investments in and that have an impact on underserved communities, and being head of real estate, that was sort of naturally aligned with not only his areas of interest, his areas of expertise, and candidly his areas of influence over the portfolio. I would say going forward, our hurdles are really in 2 categories. One would be the sort of fiduciary considerations, and second, portfolio constraints. And with respect to fiduciary considerations, I mean, you can definitely make impact investments and also achieve your fiduciary obligations. Make no mistake. But the challenges I think we've had as an investment team over time was there was a tendency for fear of violating our fiduciary obligation that we somehow held some of our impact investments to a higher standard than other investments. I mean, think about our role as investors and allocating capital. You're making forward-looking projections around expected risk and return. And so there are judgment calls involved in making impact investments. And the question is, are you being concessionary? And there was such a fear of being concessionary, that I think that sometimes we have a tendency to be overly hard on the impact investments. There are good impact investments out there that can generate a market-oriented rate of return. The second piece on portfolio constraints, and actually alludes to sort of the origins with Alan, is everything we do in terms of impact investing has to be done in a portfolio context. So where does the overall portfolio have appetite for new investments? Where do the individual asset classes have appetite for new investments? Where are the heads of the asset classes aligned with those particular investments? And so in the case of Alan, early days, he was the head of the asset class. He had influence over the asset class. He was able to push some of these investments forward. Flash forward to today, we have a broadly diversified portfolio across asset classes, like many large institutional investors. And within that, there's appetite for certain kinds of investments in each asset class. And so one of our portfolio constraints is, where do we have appetite and where do we see opportunities in the impact investing world that align with the interest that an individual asset class has. And then we overcome that by carefully working with each asset class head to make sure that we're sourcing opportunities that align with their investment interests.
So I have two follow-ups based upon what you told us. The first is one of the first things you said was that Alan was asked to pursue these type of investments. Who made that ask? Where did it come from?
That's a good question. So not to get too deep into our church governance, but the Episcopal Church has is governed by the General Convention of the Episcopal Church. It's a meeting that takes place every 3 years, which brings together Episcopal leaders from all over the world. And like our own government, there are two houses in the General Convention: House of Bishops, House of Deputies, and all of these people come together to put forth legislation around key issues that are facing the church. And so the ask around community investment came up in the context of one of those triennial meetings of the General Convention of the Episcopal Church. In terms of governance, then as well, our own board is elected by the General Convention of the Episcopal Church, and so they are attentive to the interests, the needs, the expectations, or the desires of the Episcopal Church broadly. One thing to be crystal clear on, though, is that while the General Convention can state desires, preferences, wishes, they don't actually have the legal authority to dictate what we as a pension plan do. That said, we are mindful of who we serve. We serve the beneficiaries of the Episcopal Church, many of whom are part of the General Convention and that meeting. And so we are looking for guidance over time as to what are the prevalent issues that the church wants us to lift up. And so if it's community investment, if it's racial justice, if it's climate, these are issues that we look to support through our impact investing program.
So, in other words, it was not a mandate, but it was an aspiration that was established by your general conference.
That's absolutely right. Correct.
So then you also talked about the fact that there was this fear of concessionary give-ups, that you wouldn't be earning you would be giving up return as a part of it sounded like people felt it was an inherent part of impact investing. How are you able to convince those that have governance oversight, that you weren't making concessionary give-ups in making these type of investments?
So in essence, I mean, we have a very rigorous, disciplined investment process for any investment. In any investment, you have to look at the historical track record of a particular investment. You have to look at industry comparables. And so one of the things that is tricky about allocating capital and thinking about concessionary investments versus market rate is thinking through risk-adjusted returns, right? Are you getting paid for the amount of risk you're taking? Some investments may not necessarily be the highest returning investment, but if it's relatively low risk and you're being paid appropriately for the risk you're taking, then it's non-concessionary. And so you look at market benchmarks, you look at the historical track record of the proposed investment, you look at peers, and you monitor these investments going forward. But it is a little bit more art than science in the sense that all of investing really is a judgment call, right? I mean, because again, any investment we're making is based on historical track records of an impact fund, the historical performance of particular asset classes and market segments, and then the projected risk-adjusted return of a particular investment, and you have to compare that to those benchmarks to see if you're actually looking at if you're being concessionary.
Very good. Thank you. So, Sylvia, I'm going to turn to you. In your introduction, you said that there have been a number of challenges that you all had to overcome. And so, could you describe for our audience what those challenges are? And in providing your answer, there are two questions that are in the chat that I'd like you to address. One is to talk about the size of your portfolio. So how much have you invested and how much do you currently have invested in impact? And then the second question relates to consultants and the extent to which you're using consultants to assist you in identifying investments.
Sure. So I will start off with saying a lot of what Christopher already said is, I mean, very much in line with how we think about how we're approaching impact investing. But one of the main challenges I wanted to mention that we experienced early on in the program was the fact that we were, in a way, in uncharted territory when it comes to affordable housing. When we created the PSP lending program in 1990. Impact wasn't even a coined term at that point. So the assumption was that anything impact was going to be concessionary. And so we needed to kind of prove that wrong when we were putting this program together. And then secondly, when the program started, the low-income housing tax credit program, which supports a lot of our projects that we're investing in, that program was very new. And so there wasn't much in terms of, performance and data out there on that program. Reporting was scarce at that time. And so from that perspective, it was risky for us to enter this space with very little to go off on, with the exception of, certain research that we did initially on our own and then, kind of pulling in more research over time. I think since that time, the program has grown tremendously. The industry has grown tremendously. So I feel like we've kind of addressed that hurdle in terms of questioning whether or not investing in affordable housing supported by the low-income housing tax credit is good, because we feel that over time, over 35 plus years, we've had good performance, very low loss rates, just a lot of positive things that are coming out of it. And we've invested over 2.1 billion in this space through the Positive Social Purpose Lending Program. Currently, we stand at around 535 million in existing loans, most of them tied to the affordable housing program. So again, we've got proof of concept, and I feel like we have proven that part out. And so now I feel like the big challenge for us is maintaining pipeline, because now I feel like the industry has matured so much. There's so much more, many more investors that are entering the space because they have seen the proof of concept. And so we are actually competing with a lot more groups now than we were initially, when we were really the only kid on the block, or one of the only kids on the block that really had the capital to provide to support these projects.
So you were an early adopter, but then once others recognized the advantages of the low-income housing tax credit program, you saw more competition for the loans. I suppose we should pause, and because I imagine that there are a lot of people on the webinar that are hearing the term low-income housing tax credit program for the first time. So could you briefly describe what that program is and the extent to which it provides an inherent benefit to investors like Wespath who invest in affordable housing?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, the tax credit program started in the mid 80s, and it is a federal program that each state has the ability to allocate tax credits to affordable housing projects. And the majority of that program is competitive. So, there's always an oversubscription of resources through that program and not enough to go around. So, it's very competitive. Thousands of units have been created as a result of this program, and it allows for subsidy to go into the project and thus requiring less debt to be on the project, making those properties affordable and able to cash flow because you don't need as large of a loan at market rate in order to make that project cash flow over, 15 to 30 years on average. So again, it's thousands of units are created. There's a lot of oversight. Again, because it's a federal resource, you've got HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department involved in the oversight of these projects. Treasury's involved. The allocating agencies do consistent reviews of these properties to make sure that they're maintained and operating well. And as I mentioned, because there's such an oversubscription for that resource, when those allocating agencies are putting that money out there, that equity out there, they need to make sure that they're putting that into projects that are going to be feasible over time. You don't want to waste a scarce resource.
So I imagine, Sylvia, that there are several of our listeners that are scratching their heads and saying, tax credits, wait a minute. Wespath is a nonprofit organization. How are they benefiting from tax credits?
So we are not benefiting from the tax credits. The tax credit equity that is going into the deal is just one source that is part of I call it lasagna financing. I've done that many times in my description of how these projects are structured from a financing perspective. So Wespath is involved in the investment in the debt. So we're participating in the
Okay.
debt, first position debt of these projects. In addition to our first position debt, you'll often see various other sources such as grants, subordinate debt, tax credit equity. So those that are benefiting from the tax credits are able to sell those credits and infuse the projects with proceeds from that sale. And so that is also part of the overall capital stack of that
I
project.
see.
So we're a small portion. Yeah,
So the tax credits go to the owners of the property,
correct. Correct.
and you're providing the debt financing for the property.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So Teresa, I'll go to you now. To what extent have you experienced any resistance in beginning your impact journey and how you're able to address that concern? And then simultaneously, could you also answer one of the questions that came up in the chat about the extent to which you're using consultants or other advisors to help you identify potential impact investments?
Sure. Yes, we did experience some hurdles. I don't think that's surprising. But our first hurdle, I think maybe our main hurdle really was understanding what impact investing or faith consistent investing really is and what it truly meant. Like the questions were like, did it require sacrifice and returns? Could we find market rate options? How is it different from what we're doing now? And really working through those questions has helped us continue the conversation and move forward. And with great gratitude to this forum, many of the organizations on this call and groups on this call, we have been able to learn that it is possible to use our faith and our mission, not only to shape our philanthropic initiatives, but also to fuel them by investing in solutions that hopefully one day will make our grants unnecessary. And impact investing has opened up like just a wider spectrum of opportunities for us to more fully engage with our investment capital like we do with our philanthropic capital. So we can utilize our negative screening, but also add positive screening and advocacy and shareholder engagements and mission integration, and then wrap that all with ongoing, formation and education for ourselves as stewards of that capital. And another challenge that we had was, and this may answer the consultant piece a little bit, is how we had to determine how we were going to work with our OCIO, and how were they going to accompany us on this journey. How could we partner together in the learning and the building of a portfolio that met both our financial goals and our mission goals. And I'm happy to say that so far this has been a very healthy conversation with our OCIO. There's been a lot of give and take and a lot of learning on both sides, so that has been very helpful. And I think the end result of the process will be that we can more clearly articulate our values to our managers and advisors. And then hopefully then we can apply them more consistently across our portfolio. And then I would say the other barrier that we face is the challenge of identifying products, managers, and advisors who incorporate impact investing and finance consistent investing, already within their portfolio design, that aligns with our mission goals, maintains our liquidity requirements, and does so at a cost that still maintains our overall return profiles. I would say too that dialogue, deep listening, and a willingness to experiment and iterate have been really useful tools for us in overcoming some of these hurdles and continuing to advance the conversations and our deeper discernment into how we can actually apply faith-consistent investing in our portfolio management.
So I have a couple follow-ups, and we just got a question from the audience that I'll add as well. And so the first thing I noticed is you said you needed to work with your OCIO and you had a back and forth to gain a mutual understanding of what it was that you were hoping to accomplish. What would you say was the most impactful learning that the OCIO acquired as a result of the back and forth dialogue that you had that helped the OCIO help you identify opportunities to fulfill the impact mandate that you're trying to pursue?
I think what was helpful was, continuing to have the conversation, stressing what was valuable to us, what we were looking for in different asset classes, and having the give and take as managers were presented to us, like during a rebalance or a strategy kind of update, that we could say like this really isn't hitting where we would like to be, and I think the most impactful for us is that we actually moved into a product within our portfolio through the OCIO that did meet our standards for both financial and mission. So it really is a dialogue, and it really does take a village to build up this space. And it has been helpful for us, to introduce our OCIO to groups like FaithInvest and others that have been steeped in impact investing and faith consistent investing. And I think that helps build the field too, because it's not a natural inclination, I would say, across the board for like in the OCIO space. So it helps build that space and build that muscle within the OCIO field.
And then you also said that there are myriad advisors that could have helped you on your journey. And so, what was the process that you went through to narrow down the ones that would be most helpful to you?
Um, I I truly believe it was the Holy Spirit that helped us narrow that down. We were very fortunate early on in our journey to, meet folks like yourselves, the Francisco Collaborative. We were through Seek, we were offered consulting hours with Find Impact. And they really helped us as a group early on in our process stop and discern what our values really were, how we wanted to live them out in our portfolio, and to really be able to build from our values first, not try to build backwards into our values. So having, this community of people that were so willing to share their experience with us, has just been astronomical for us in a sense of building our capacity.
I see. So, a question that's in the chat
Mhm.
regards the investment portion of your portfolio and the philanthropic part of your portfolio. And the specific question is, how do you align philanthropic capital and investment capital? And is there a part is that a part of your overall strategy?
Yeah, so that's what we're learning to do. So we see a lot of themes in our philanthropic side, that we support, like food insecurity, regenerative agriculture, climate solutions, things like that. So we wanted to mirror that in our investment capital. Like, how can that investment capital support those issues that are currently, concerns and opportunities within our philanthropic portfolio. So how can we also, be part of going upstream and solving those solutions so that maybe our grant dollars can be directed to, unfortunately, whatever is next.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much. So, Sylvia, I'm going to come back to you now. So you talked a lot about the affordable housing program and its reliance on the low-income housing tax credit program. So that's, as you described, that's been the bread and butter of Wespath Investments Impact Investment Program. What's on the horizon? What are you currently exploring that's new? And tell us about how you're going about sourcing those type of investments.
Well, so we are continuing to focus on growing the PSP program. So as I mentioned, we are definitely in more competition within the market as far as, the types of deals that we're able to secure, and the groups that we're working with. So we're continuing to expand our relationships with intermediary groups. And that just kind of going back to how we're structured, the majority of investments through the PSP program are sourced through third-party intermediaries. Most of those groups are community development financial institutions or nonprofits. Their missions align very much with Wespath, so it's a good synergy. And really, those are the groups that are bringing us the deals. They originate the deals for us, they underwrite them, and they manage them over time. So they're servicing these deals for the longevity of the actual investment. I would say that one of the big topics that's coming up now, kind of tied to affordable housing and also just broader community development, is church redevelopment. There's a lot of churches that have a lot of property, and they are uncertain what the future holds for that specific church or what they want to do with that property. So we are having conversations around that, and whether or not there's any fit for our program specifically, or if there's other ways to be meaningful and helpful to these different groups to be able to figure out what the next best steps are. And we do envision that some of those transformations of churches will probably make their way through our program or similar programs, as long as you have the right combination of development team in place to be able to do that. And then in addition to that, I would say that impact is growing. It's a much broader field than it was when we started. So there's a lot more themes to kind of focus on. And so that's where we're at now. Like we have to figure out what other themes are the right fit for Wespath. We've primarily been focused on the debt space through the Positive Social Purpose Lending Program. So we're looking to expand beyond that, but just kind of looking at what else, what other opportunities are out there that would best fit our portfolio as a whole, to be, a benefit to our investors as well.
So
Um,
something you said that's intriguing that I think our participants would like to hear more about is the church properties. So I think you're talking about churches that have actually closed, or churches just have surplus property that they don't need anymore.
It's a combination. So there are churches that those doors are closing, congregations are depleting, and the church building itself is closed or has been closed for a number of years. And then the other piece is there are churches that are still open, but they have an abundance of property that's unused. And they are trying to figure out whether or not there's a way to potentially carve off a portion of that property, maybe build something on that property and create an ongoing income stream to be able to sustain themselves for long periods of time. So it's a variety. Of different structures that we're looking at and people are considering.
Do you have a quick example of a conversion that you
Um,
might be able to tell the audience about?
yeah, so there's been a few now. I'm trying to think we actually we were involved in a pre-development loan that supported the construction of a new affordable housing property with land donated by a church. And
Huh.
so that's kind of our involvement currently. We've actually seen other projects and examples that not haven't necessarily come through our program, but have been successful through other programs. Again, where a church has closed down, the organization actually hires consultants and a development team to figure out, best and highest use for that property. Some groups have stayed within the ownership structure in some capacity, and then there's been others that they sell the property outright. That property is converted into affordable housing or community development. Some, in other examples, sports fields or some other community amenity that's really needed. And it's really been successful. It's just challenging. It takes a long time. One
Mhm.
thing that we're finding is, there's just a variety of knowledge that's out there. And so many organizations, that's really what the first part, you need to find the right group to work with to be able to take those next steps. And it's a very patient process, takes a long time. Many of the successful transactions that have come to fruition have taken, 5, 6, 7 years at times. So
Mhm.
takes a lot of money, a lot of thought, a lot of creativity. And so Wespath is really trying to, find our best place within that space to be most helpful to the groups that are
Great,
considering.
great. Thanks for that. So, Christopher, I want to come to you, and I'd like to ask two questions. The first is, what have been the results so far?
Mhm. Yeah.
How successful has your impact investing been?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what advice would you give to people that are on this call that haven't that the extent of their faith consistent investing has been negative screening and they want to move forward
Yeah.
with impact investing? What advice can you offer to them as they begin their journey?
Sure. And so, in terms of the success, it's been consistent with the rest of our portfolio. That is, some of our investments have done very, very well, and then every once in a while you have an investment that disappoints. It's part of investing, and so As a general rule, the risk-adjusted return for our impact and portfolio has been lower, but that doesn't mean it's concessionary. It's just that the kinds of investments we've tended to make in our impact portfolio has targeted lower risk-adjusted returns, right? And so it's not, I mean, we've done a lot of debt investments, again, lower risk, lower returning real estate investments, some core infrastructure investments, whereas, some of our higher uh, volatility, higher income, higher earning strategies such as venture capital and so forth has not necessarily been a core part of our portfolio. So it's been consistent with our expectations. Some have done well, some investments have done well, some maybe not so well. But there's nothing in the return history that would indicate an indictment of impact investing. You can genuinely put forth an impact investing program that generates the returns you need for your institution, and stop.
Very good.
In terms of advice, I mean, one piece of advice is, well, to get started, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But then one area where we we are concessionary with our time, but not with our return expectations, is some of these investments just take time to understand. You have to roll up your sleeves, you have to dig in, you have to work through the complexities of a particular investment structure, a particular strategy. And so while we will not be concessionary on return, we will be concessionary on time. That is, we will make the effort. We will do the extra work, and do the extra work in some cases for an investment that is below our normal target size of an investment, right? So we will make a smaller investment and do more work for that smaller investment than we might otherwise do in a non-impact strategy. So invest the money, invest the time, invest the effort, and you can find good investments that will generate the returns that you need. So I hope that's helpful.
So yeah, so basically the first thing you said was impact investments are no different from, like, say, investing in stocks. They're going to be stocks that are winners and do really well, and they're going to be stocks that don't do well.
Right.
And in the case of impact investments, it's just like any other investment. Sometimes they fail, but you're saying that the entire sector, the entire space can't be eliminated just because you've had one failure.
Correct. 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Teresa, you have just started this journey. From your perspective, what advice would you have to someone? I think what I heard from you earlier was that you benefited from joining networks. You mentioned the Francesco Collaborative, you mentioned FaithInvest. If someone's starting a journey, is that what you would suggest, is to find a network of other investors to learn from?
Yeah, yes, I think finding your community of support is a tremendous benefit as you're starting out. And we have been blessed by that generosity of people sharing their journeys with us, not only what worked, but what challenges they faced, what we need to spend more time on, what you might be able to spend less time on, all of those good practical, ways to implement faith consistent investing. And so I would encourage anyone to really engage with other impact investors and the broader impact community, because we have found this community as an invaluable source of encouragement and insight as we progress on our journey. So yes, I would definitely suggest that.
Very good. Well, there were a couple of questions that we were not able to get to in the chat, and I apologize for that. But I do thank the three panelists very much. If we were all live, I know you would be getting a hearty applause now. But thank you very much for attending. Now, in conclusion, before we go, I'd just like to provide you with some information about a class we're offering for service providers to faith-based institutions and individuals. and Pippa is placing a link in the chat on that. And then as a final note, our forums take place on the first Thursday of each quarter. So our next forum will be on December 4th. And as always, we're here to help. If you want to know how faith aligned your investments really are, please send us your investment policy and guidelines. Of course, we will keep confidentiality, and we'll provide you back with a free assessment, which compares where you sit relative to industry practices, and then give you some recommendations for further aligning your investment policy with your faith beliefs. Again, thanks all for attending. And once again, thanks to our panelists. And we are concluded.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.